Dana White's Contender Series. This is Season 8, Episode 9. We have 5 fights lined up this Tuesday night. I'm John Kelly. Let's hear the picks. And we're going to kick things off in the flyweight division, as currently they have Sean Gauci, a minus 200 favorite. The comeback on Anthony Drillich is plus 154. And we'll start on the Gauci side. This is a guy who's a 9-1 prospect fighting out of Australia. And of those victories, 5 of them have come by knockout, and he seems to be a very well-rounded fighter. He actually has a win over Steve Erceg back on the regional scene, and he was basically an up-and-coming fighter in the Australian regional scene. Lot of big hopes for this kid, and he ended up dealing with some health complications that actually kept him out of fighting for about 3 years. So he had a little bit of a layoff between 2019 and 2022, came back, 3 straight finishes, and now he's booked on the Contender Series against another Australian prospect in Anthony Drillich, who's 8-1, fights out of Australia. So you have Gauci, who's the double champ, the former double champ over in Hex promotion, which is the regional promotion that brought us Cody Haddon. And then you have Drillich, who's the flyweight champ over in Eternal MMA, which is the other well-known regional promotion over in Australia. And that is, of course, what brought us Steve Erceg, who Gauci has a win over that I just talked about. So it all comes full circle. But now we have 2 pretty bright Australian prospects that are going to square off here for a UFC contract. And I think each guy has some advantages. For starters, Gauci, I just think, is a little bit more polished, a little bit more proven. He's fought the better level of competition. He seems to have a more well-rounded skill set, solid striker, solid power, has the takedowns as well, and he holds a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then on the flip side, Drillich, he calls himself the hardest hitting flyweight, the self-proclaimed hardest hitting flyweight in the world. Fights out of the southpaw stance, certainly does carry some big power in his hands, but he's a little bit one-dimensional in that sense. He has shown the ability to land takedowns, but his wrestling isn't all that high level, and he typically struggles to control his opponents once he takes them down. He's not a huge threat to submit anybody either. So it's one where I could see it being competitive, and I do expect this one to probably hit the judges' scorecards, but I'm going to favor the Gauci side. Again, just more proven, fought better competition, and I just think has a little bit more polished of a skill set, but it's going to be a fun fight. I'm going to go with Gauci by decision. He's going to be the first pick in the DGen parlay. Next up, we have a welterweight matchup between Islam Dulatov and Vanilto Antunes. And we'll start on the Dulatov side. Currently, he's the biggest betting favorite on the card, minus 750. The comeback on Antunes is plus 470. Now, Dulatov was actually scheduled to fight back in week 1 this season. He was scheduled to face off against Dang Ming. And honestly, I thought that was a showcase fight for him then. And now I think this is a clear showcase spot for him once again. He's very tall for the division, very long, uses his frame pretty well. He's a very good striker. All 10 of his wins have come inside the distance. And he actually has, a little bit of sneaky submission upside in his game as well. It's not just the striking that you have to worry about. And I think that could play a factor here in this fight against Antunes, who is the former welterweight LFA champion. And usually, you hear LFA champ and you're like, man, this guy must be pretty good. But it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's less of a feather in his cap, but he took that fight on short notice, and it was his LFA debut, and he was a big underdog, and the dude he was fighting basically just quit. He landed some big shots on him, and he literally just shelled up, wouldn't defend himself. The ref let it go for a minute and a half, and eventually he just called it. It wasn't even that good of a look. So it's I don't know. I just don't really think Antunes, aside from being a power puncher, he's a 16-6 prospect fighting out of Brazil. 14 of those wins have come by knockouts. So we know what he's going to bring to the table. He's got power in his hands, but it's just not very developed. And he doesn't have really anything else you have to worry about. And then when it comes to his defensive grappling, I think there's huge holes here. You even heard it in that fight over in LFA where they're like, yeah, he better watch out because he's only a blue belt or whatever they said. And I think that could be a problem for him here, because I think Dulatov is not only the cleaner striker and has just as much upside to hurt Antunes on the feet, but if he looks to grapple here at all, I think he's got to have a pretty big advantage. So he's a huge favorite, but I do think he gets the job done here, and I think it comes inside the distance. We'll say it's Dulatov by TKO. That's the official pick, and he's going to keep things rolling in the D-Gen parlay. Which brings us to our next matchup in the heavyweight division as Lucas Camacho takes on Mario Pinto. And now they have Pinto, a minus 620 favorite. The comeback on Camacho is plus 400. And honestly, I think this line is nuts. I think a lot of times on Contender Series, we see, the market just kind of treats some of these favorites as if they're really bulletproof. And I've said time and time again, like if you're laying any type of juice in general, but especially massive juice, you want to be very sure that they're bulletproof. And I just don't see that here, especially in the heavyweight division, where unless you're like clearly separating, I'm just going to have a hard time with this price tag. And I think Lucas Camacho has some skills that we want to back here at a big underdog price tag. For starters, he's an undefeated prospect, 6-0, fighting out of Brazil. He's fought a couple times over an LFA, and he seems to have a pretty well-rounded skill set. On the feet, his striking is not pretty. He's a little bit, it looks a little bit funky at times, but he wants to move forward. He keeps up a good pace, good volume, and he's got nasty knees in the clinch as well. He also has a little bit of a ground game. He can take guys down. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and his grappling is actually pretty good in terms of heavyweight division standards. And on the flip side, you look at Pinto, well, he's a minus 620 favorite. Like I'm expecting to be really wowed here, going to watch the tape, and it's like, I don't know, man. Like, not that he's a bad fighter, but like, I think these guys are very close in terms of their skill set. Pinto's 8-0, so he's another undefeated prospect fighting out of Portugal, and he definitely moves well for the division. He's a little bit, lighter on his feet. He's got some really sharp leg kicks. That's probably his best weapon, but he kind of starts slow, and he's just a little patient at times in the beginning to really get going, but he does have good cardio. He's been tested over 25 minutes. He's the former LFL heavyweight champion. So he's definitely got some attributes that, you like to see, but I don't think he has a ton of huge finishing power. Like, he's not like super powerful. And like, I would say Camacho has just as much finishing power, especially if you factor in his grappling upside as well. So this is one where, honestly, I just think the line is super wide here, and I got to go with the underdog, Lucas Camacho. I'm going to pick him outright, and I kind of struggled here in terms of, is he going to get the finish? Is it going to go 15 minutes? I ended up siding with the decision. I wouldn't be shocked at a finish on either side, especially after the way that they kind of mean mugged each other during the face-offs earlier today. But I am going to pick Camacho by decision. That's the official pick, and he's going to be the big underdog shot here in the D-Gen parlay. Next fight up in the lightweight division, we have Cody Steele, a minus 270 favorite. The comeback on Chasen Blair is plus 200. And we'll start on the Steele side. He was originally scheduled to fight back in week 5, and now they ended up rebooking him. That was the one where he fought, he was supposed to fight Otani, who ended up basically just having a panic attack before the fight started, and he withdrew literally during the event. Super bizarre. So now they got Steele coming back in here. I actually had a bet against Steele in that fight, but I don't think I can get there on the dog here. And I do really like Chasen Blair. I think both of these guys honestly have a future in the UFC. I just think it's a really tough matchup for Blair because Steele, he's 6-0, undefeated prospect, pretty well-rounded, comes from a high-level grappling, like submission grappling competition background, holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's very slick on the mat, and he's got some solid wrestling as well, and he's got big power on the feet, good cardio. The only real thing is that he gets reckless in the striking, and he can be hurt, he can be clipped, and that's really the part that you kind of want to see more developments from him. But the cardio is certainly on point. He's going to carry that pace and power for 3 rounds if needed. And then on the flip side, Blair, I just don't think you can believe that he can do that over 15 minutes. And I think that's the biggest concern for him here, because outside of that, I really like this kid. For starters, he's a 6-2 prospect fighting out of California. All 6 of his wins have come by finish. He's the former lightweight Cage Warriors champion, and he's a training partner of Paddy Pimblett. He also comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He actually wrestled at UNC Chapel Hill when I was there. So we have that, Tar Heel connection. So I want to root for the guy. His jiu-jitsu is actually pretty underrated, honestly. He's a pretty slick grappler, holds a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he's very opportunistic on the mat. The thing is like a lot of what he does here, the wrestling background, power on the feet, Jiu-Jitsu, like Steele is just going to be better at him once this hits the mat. And I think that's where I have worries. And then I certainly have worries if the fight gets extended, because Blair's last 5 fights have all ended inside the first round. He's actually only fought outside of the first round twice in his career. So it's one where I could see him being very competitive, maybe even winning the first round, but then I don't trust the cardio. And eventually I just think the better grappler with the gas tank as well is going to take over, and that's Cody Steele. We'll say it's Cody Steele by submission. That's the official pick. Which brings us to the main event, and this one's in the light heavyweight division as Islam Masrif takes on Artem Vakhaitov, and Vakhaitov is a minus 520 favorite. The comeback on Masrif is plus 350, and this is another one where I think the line is just getting to be a little bit wide here. Not so much that I'm able to go out and pick Masrif like I did with Camacho, but I do think there is a world here where he looks like significant value, because even though he's only 3-0, he went pro last year, so he's very green in terms of MMA. But all 3 of his wins have come inside the distance. He hasn't really faced much level of competition, but he trains in a good gym. He's a training partner of Nasruddin Imavov, who we just saw get a nice win recently over Brendan Allen. And he just seems like a pretty well-rounded prospect for light heavyweight. He's a solid striker, fights out of the southpaw stance, has power on the feet, but has a little bit of a ground game as well. His grappling's not all that bad. And I think that could be an advantage for him here against Vakhaitov, who is a former Glory kickboxing champion, has a win over Alex Pereira. So it's another one of those, like, pumping up the Glory kickboxing. You know, they want to do that like they did with Almeida, and before him like they did with Pereira, since it's translated so well. And I think that's why we're getting such a big price tag here, but I don't know if I buy into it. I mean, Vakhaitov is certainly a very, very good striker, high-level striker, super polished on the feet, and he's got nasty leg kicks, and he looks for that in a lot of his fights, and I think that's going to be a clear advantage for him here. But I don't know what his grappling looks like. I suspect it's not very good, and I just don't know if it's going to be tested in this spot, and that's where I am going to side with him, just because he's the better striker. The leg kicks, should be able to compromise the movement of Masrif and eventually land something big and knock him out on feet. So the pick is going to be Vakhaitov by TKO, but depending on where this line goes by tomorrow, I might get involved on the side, like outside of the D-Gen bet, just for a little sprinkle on the dog for such a big number. But the official pick is going to be Vakhaitov by TKO, and he's going to round things out in the D-Gen parlay. So to recap for the D-Gen parlay in the first fight of the night, the flyweights, I'm going with my guy Sean Gauchi. I just think this guy, very legitimate prospect, a little bit more well-rounded than Drilich, and I think that's going to pay off over 15 minutes. In the second fight of the night, we're going with Islam Dulatov, and then I just think he's got a big submission grappling edge as well. Dulatov by TKO in the second fight. In the third fight, big underdog shot here, Lucas Camacho. I just don't think Pinto is anywhere near a minus 620 favorite here. I think Camacho's very competitive and very live to win this fight, and hopefully it comes by decision. We're going Camacho in the third fight. In the fourth fight, Cody Steele, Chasen Blair, my favorite fight of the night. I like both these kids a lot. I'm going to side with Cody Steele. The grappling, the high-level black belt, and the cardio. We know he's going to carry that pace as the fight gets extended, and I just can't say the same about Blair. We'll say Steele gets it done by submission. And then in the main event, I don't trust the price tag here, but I do trust the striking, and I think that ends up being the difference. Vakhaitov by TKO in the main event, and that's going to do it. As always, guys, appreciate you guys watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you next week.